this is like a very hot topic, and so there's a lot of, we could kind of speak infinitely on it. And so I, again, welcome discussion and conversation. Challenge me, challenge one another. That's what makes a lovely panel. So I think when you pose a question like, what will it take to have more women-led frontier tech companies and have those succeed, it by nature means that there's some sort of issue that this is facing at the moment. Thank you so much, Mr. Volunteer. Another round of applause. Yes. Thanks, dude. Yeah, so I guess I thought it would be good to open with what you see as the most important issues facing women when it comes to leading frontier tech companies. Maybe each of you as individuals, you can start if you like.
Well, I think themselves. I think, well, I do believe that there are opportunities that, sometimes you don't find it in some situations, but the only thing that takes, women behind and back is themselves, because they might not choose to go for the challenge. It's of course challenging. I have a lot of stories to share. For example, my co-founder at Women in AI, she's from Lebanon, and when she tells her story, it's so crazy how she actually got her PhD in AI. She's actually coming from a family which was really, preserved and not really telling her that you should be an engineer, but actually become a teacher or stay at home or marry. And she said no. She left France. She found the financial resources. She didn't know even the language. Then she became somebody who is successful, but it was very challenging for her. So I think, in my opinion, the first thing is women themselves, if they aim at doing something they can do, of course, they need to have more, balanced opportunities.
Yeah, I think you're right that women sometimes lack confidence. And the question is, why does that happen? I don't think you're born with less confidence than the baby boys. But somewhere along the way, women begin to feel that they can't make it in tech. And so I have a charity in Singapore, and we teach girls AI. And one of the things that we do is have a survey. And right in the beginning, we did a survey of, do you think you're less competent than boys? And they said no. Then we said, do you think you could have a career in AI? And they said no. So it was very paradoxical. They knew they were as competent at math or computer science, or could be as good, but they, for reasons they couldn't define, they didn't feel that they could make it in the industry. And so I think, in Singapore, we're trying to smash those myths that women can't do well. We're trying to encourage women at all levels. The government is doing it, corporations are doing it, and they do need to have those role models and that environment that stimulates them. A number of my friends are now really pushing for more board and gender diversity in boards as well, and to have more young women have a career path in tech. So I think that unless you create the environment, you're not going to have women lead tech companies. And that is it's a chicken and egg problem. They lack the confidence, but to build the confidence, we have to give them the tools and the environment that encourages them to do that.
From my position, from where I sit, it's a slightly different perspective. So I don't think it's a motivation issue. I think we're, as women, extremely capable, if not slightly more capable, because of the additional skills that we have around collaboration, around communication. What I see as the issue is a funding problem. There is a serious funding pipeline for women-led tech companies. It is significantly more difficult to get funding from venture capitalists. It is significantly more difficult to be recognized as an authority in your field. And this might be from my public health background, where I tend to take a societal and a structural view of these things. But I think when you're looking at the numbers, women-led tech companies are not receiving the backing, despite a strong track record of success, despite strong entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial skills are not receiving the venture capital. And this is because our VCs are mostly white men who are sitting on the money, to be quite frank. And I'm coming from, as you can hear from my accent, an American background, but this is a big issue all over the world. And we find this to be the case particularly because people who do hold the money don't have a vested interest in pushing against the status quo and changing that status quo. They may speak to it, they may be interested in representation and in diversity, but when it really comes down to what that diversity brings to the system and how it challenges their authority, we start to experience more resistance. So I think we definitely need to look at funding pipelines as a part of this as well.
Yeah. Well, I can also say from my part, it's probably a factor of a matter of several reasons. So one is this, that of course if you start, girls do less math, less sciences to begin with. So in that way, they go less into engineering, and so the starting point are less people. I was also reading these studies about this funding. It would be interesting to dig a bit deeper into like why it is. You mentioned white men and so forth. Does that explain everything? So for example, now the previous panel was talking about maternity leaves, and which may be one reason also, like the funding managers are looking at, like, should I put my money here or there? And, maybe there's a young woman, maybe they're going to be staying home, and is it now safe? And it's very rational, you would imagine in that from that perspective. So, that would be my first take. So several reasons, already starting early on, but then leading to these factors.
Awesome. I think then what's interesting to me is the fact that, you're all very powerful women who have done incredible things. So my curiosity stems a little bit from the perspective of understanding who I speak to. And I'm curious, what is different about you that allowed you to grow into the positions that you're in and go in the trajectory that you're in? What opportunities maybe that you have? I asked the same question of Zara and her friends. She said didn't have the same gusto that she has maybe. So I'm curious, what do you feel was responsible for your success?
For myself, so it's a little bit different, my basic situation. So I'm coming from Iran, and I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, with the country, but we have 70% women engineers. So actually we have more engineers than men. And that's the reason that I say it's different is because we actually are born and grown up with these two options: either become an engineer or a doctor. And our schools are separated too. So we always compare ourselves with another girl, and we don't think that's okay as a boy. So my math is weak. It's okay because boys are better. No, we are all girls in the school, and we are all competing with each other, and basically. So women tend to study more. One of the reasons I think is because of the maybe lack of opportunities for women, equal opportunities. So they aim higher to actually have better jobs especially after the revolution that happened. So for me, I'm an engineer also. All my cousins, my sister, my aunt, and all our family, and I didn't have another option. I wanted to study piano, and my parents didn't let me. That was another sad story. So for me, I had challenging situation to come where I am now. I came to France. I decided to leave the country. I decided to pursue my studies, and for myself, I was always in finance and banking. So I, did finance, corporate finance and banking. I even started to work for 1 year and a half, and suddenly one day, and I really liked always challenges. So I met this friend of mine. I call it a toxic coffee. So I took this toxic coffee with him, and I decided to quit banking and launch a startup with him. And that was a total failure, actually. But that was the best decision I took in my life. At the time, I had just finished my studies, so I had no money. I didn't even tell my parents I did that. So I asked my best friend to stay at her place so I don't pay rent. And I was working 14 hours per day in front of my hair desk and a chair, and I could just work on my laptop. And that's how I became an entrepreneur, actually. And it started like that because I wanted to do something I was not allowed to, and it was exciting, and I didn't know. And I had never studied entrepreneurship. Actually, I had a boyfriend at the time. He was very rich, and he was studying entrepreneurship. I was always thinking entrepreneurship is for rich people because they need to put their own money, and it's not for me because I was not rich. So that, for me, it was challenging and hustling and reaching to where I am. I launched 2 other startups. The last one was fortunately a success as a business, but a failure as a co-founder's relationship. It was another story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I chuckled there. It's just some series of events seems so similar to what my life is right now. And I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. Sorry, I posed the same question to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think for me, I actually came to tech very late in my life. I was very much into humanities and literature and poetry and human rights. And I think that because even my parents, even though they came from a liberal arts background, there was never any sense that anything was impossible to study. You know, nothing was too hard or too easy. It was just, you just went along. And then when I went to college, I met a lot of people from Russia and Estonia and other places and Romania. And they said, oh, look, we love science, we love math. And I was like, well, that sounds interesting. So I just like veered that way. And I think that has always pretty much been my style, that I really don't think anything is impossible if you put your mind to it. That doesn't mean you always succeed. And so that is not the criteria based on which you pursue something. You pursue something because in that moment in time, you find deep within yourself a great passion and commitment to pursue it. And I think that is the only thing at any given time that motivates me. And so I have a lot of failures behind me. I have some modest successes as well. But they all seem kind of irrelevant because I live fully in the moment. And I think that leads me a lot to do whatever I want to do.
My background is in international development and humanitarian aid, which is already a field where there's a lot of gender equality, where there's a focus on women leaders, on supporting women-led enterprises, and just on lifting women and girls in general in society. So I kind of just came up that way. My mother is in the same field, so I was raised with that around the dinner table, with the high expectation that of course women would succeed, and why on earth wouldn't they? And as a woman co-founder, in that industry, coming up at UNICEF and then splitting away from UNICEF, starting my own company, women founders were given preference for contracts. And that has been the case in the aid industry. It can be sometimes the case depending on the grants that we're going for from the Gates Foundation and from others. So there is an environment in the fields that I work in that privileges women's leadership and that makes sure that there's equal representation, not just of women in leadership, but of other diverse groups as well. And so that the companies that are getting these contracts are actually representing the people who they serve, which I think is a really important piece. I think the role of making sure that cohorts in it, for example, are half women, that women are at the table when we're making decisions about who's getting contracts and what kind of business decisions are being made, that women are a part of those decisions is really key to making sure that the pipeline of women-led tech companies continues to thrive.
Okay. Yeah, so I get my education is in economics and econometrics, and so initially I wanted to be a microeconomist, and then working in that area at some point I realized maybe not. It was too lonesome, so I didn't just want to do research. And then I think it was a bit like finding this competitive advantage. So like I went into to do marketing, and then suddenly the data marketing, and that was some 12 years ago, and it became like actually this whole the AI thing. It wasn't called AI at that point, but data science and so forth. And now we I'm co-founding an AI startup, and so I think that's one thing. Find your competitive advantage, what it is. So even if you're not the best marketeer, you're not the best data person, but putting that together maybe is something unique. And then I would say also what has helped me forward is actually a man. So I think having also male coaches is really important. So, of course, we women, we need each other's support, and we need those role models. I think that's especially important for younger girls. But at some point in the career, I was in the lucky position that that actually there was like a man who took me as anybody else and would kind of be coaching, hey, like it makes sense to do this, makes sense to do that. And that kind of, then you started talking about this confidence that, at least for me, was a big boost in the confidence that, hey, yeah, sure, let's, that's something you can do. And yeah. And then, of course, it's a matter of coincidence as well, a bit of luck, and things happen. You don't always plan things. I never really wanted to. Not say never, but that was never my plan now that I want to found a company. But then at some point, it was the right time that it felt like I was doing these AI things in companies, and then it felt like, well, there's so much out there. It wouldn't be fun to actually work with many industries, and this is just picking up right now. And then, yeah, we started talking with some colleagues that, hey, let's do something together, and then we jumped. So. Yeah, it's also difficult to plan everything ahead, like decades ahead. Yeah. Impossible, yeah.
So what's work? I feel like there's and you spoke about a couple of them, but there's a couple of this mindset shift maybe, and other like pipeline issues, and lots of things need to change if we want to maybe have the future that we hope to see. So my question is, what's working with what we're doing, the initiatives, like you mentioned some, what is working in these initiatives to see more of this, and what things aren't working so well that we thought might in prompting women to either have this mindset change, to start leading frontier tech companies, to chase after ICT jobs? Is there specific instances where things are working really well or aren't working really well?
From my point of view, I mean, I see in my surrounding a lot of initiatives for women, helping women. I don't know, girls in tech, women in tech. A lot of initiatives. Some of them are really, really good, working really well. Some of them are, sometimes you feel that it's just talking, and sometimes I think that it's maybe too much, emphasizing on the women part and talking about, I would say, nagging all the time, instead of giving more power to women and giving them maybe resources, as you said, solutions to help them evolve. One other thing, funny thing that had happened to myself was that, so they were saying that, okay, I work in events and conferences, and also, run startup, pitches and everything. They were asking me, so come on the, panels of full women talking about women issues. And I was like, thankfully we have you today here on this panel. But I was thinking, why we are always talking about like issues, and why not putting women on a stage talking about a business case, talking about an innovation, talking what she has created something. And that presentation could be a man also performing it. But okay, now, just in case, as an example, we have a woman. So like that, we create a role model. Like that, we create actually, make it normal that, okay, a woman also can be an expert, right? So for me, there are two different ways we can, approach this. Either with, from a really inferior, I would say, down perspective, that's okay, we're sad, we're like women, we don't have opportunities, what should we do? Or say, hey, so we have actually these brilliant women, like we can basically push them forward, talking more about them, and creating projects showcasing them. I think events and media have really big roles in that. Like events like this basically can help this happening. Also, in schools, I think that from a really younger age, we need to do that to help young girls, to learn that they have opportunities. So there was an interesting study done, I think, by Stanford, that they were asking students after graduation that, why didn't you choose tech? They said that because we didn't think that we're going to get hired, but It was not because they were not interested. They were just thinking that they're not going to get hired. And that's the thing that, I think we should start it from the early time. And also in companies, we have a lot of things to do to change it, to help women to have more opportunities to get hired, and to change management from the top managers to know that they can hire women.
But I think that's a really good point about not portraying oneself as a victim, and instead, but at the same time, not talking about success as something that is magical. But I think the most thing that really helps is when you hear stories about the ups and downs that people went through and how normal that is. That is very empowering to women. And I've noticed that these groups of women that are coming up everywhere are actually helping each other quite a bit. It's really making a difference. Just speaking about younger women, these are 18 to 21-year-olds that we're teaching in Singapore. And they learn the classification algorithms, etc. And then I'll go in, or somebody will go in and talk to them about these other younger Asian women who are starting companies. And you can just see that they get excited. And so I think these kind of role models do make a difference, and they make them think if they can do it, we can do it. And a lot of it is, there's an emotional side to it that needs to be nurtured and needs to be helped. And I think that these programs do help quite a bit. I mean, I have actually seen that. And for myself as well, I'm on many WhatsApp groups with women. And it's not like we're talking about, I don't know, like manicures and pedicures. We're literally all talking about AI. It was kind of nice to have that group, and once in a while we'll throw in something that just us girls understand. So it's nice.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why not mixing it with guys too? What is the problem if a guy is also in that group?
I don't know. There isn't a problem, but actually I think that it so happens that I've been invited to some of them. It's kind of nice. So some of these things are hard to articulate, but I spent like 12 years on Wall Street. I'm usually one of the only women in a boardroom meeting who actually is a techie and an AI engineer. But it's nice to now I see more of my friends like heading data analytics and data science and AI. And I think there's a nice camaraderie and a sisterhood over there. So I actually was skeptical in the beginning, but I have become a believer that it actually helps.
Just I wanted to add something, but to not yet avoid a misunderstanding. So my initiative is called Women in AI. Actually, we have a Slack, and we have a community of 1,000 women. We have maybe 3 men. On our Slack is full of women, and all our channels are women. We also organize events that are full women speakers, but the audience is mixed.
Yeah.
I started to ask my question, that should be keep it separated. That's why I'm really interested in this conversation.
No, I think it's a very important question. And I, like I said, I switched them. I don't know what you girls think, but
I think as long as there is an equal representation, having solidarity groups is really important, and not just for women, for other so-called minorities.
That's true.
Because we need to share experiences, we need to gather information, we need to hear, oh, that didn't just happen to me, that happened to you too, and it destigmatizes to be frank, the experiences that those of us have that can be discouraging, and we tend to think, oh, that happened to me, it must be me, whereas really it's a societal issue. So part of what I'm seeing that we're doing right is this idea of mentoring. And for me, women mentors have been pivotal, particularly in between career shifts. When I'm switching jobs or when I'm negotiating a salary, that's when my mentors really come into play. And that's when I see women tend to cut ourselves short. We've been taught to play nice. We've been taught you get the job, just make other people happy. And all of the societal conditioning that we've been led to do can really pay us a disservice that perpetuates down the career. So especially at that moment, having strong women advocates, having strong women mentors has been pivotal to me. The other piece that I think we're doing well is recognizing the importance that women on boards create companies that have higher returns. This is now, this is proven in the research. Having women in leadership positions, particularly equal representation on boards, is excellent for a company's bottom line. So coming at it from that angle, actually making an argument from a performance standpoint, from a numbers standpoint, tends to convince people who may not be convinced by the general diversity angle. So I think that's also something that's making a lot of ground. Where I see is still challenging, and again, I'm coming from mostly a Western and American work environment, is what I like to call bro culture. And the idea that when I go talk to a tech company that's led by men, it has a lot of men. And this isn't just in the US, it's also in other Western countries. Yeah. There's a lot of men, majority men who are the developers. There's this environment that actually, it may not be explicitly hostile to women, but there's a lot of very subtle ways that this can be discriminating. It was mentioned in the last panel, most of the advancements happen when people are having drinks outside of work hours, things that women who have families may not be able to attend. Also, I've noticed, one thing I'd really like to see change is there is a culture of bystanders largely remaining silent in companies when, perhaps I'm generalizing from my own experience, but when there is a subtle discrimination, it might be a language issue or someone making a joke that's at women's expense. Instead of someone else calling it out, usually everyone looks at the woman as if she's the one that's supposed to say, excuse me, that makes me feel very uncomfortable, further calling attention to herself, further damaging, quite frankly, her career and not being seen as a team player. Oh, she can't take a joke, what's wrong with her? Now, there's a really interesting opportunity at that moment for the men in particular to say, hey, that's actually not that funny. And just to gently shift the culture. There are a lot of other things that create collaboration, that create humor, that create companionship, and that really make a strong team. And I just think those tiny micro adjustments actually make a huge impact on women feeling comfortable where we work.
Yeah. I also believe in the role models, as everybody said, and not from the perspective I'm here as a woman, I'm here as a female expert. I'm just an expert. So let's not draw attention to the gender at all. So rather downplay it. But I think it is really important. And I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I just last week talked to her about math. I said when I went to school, like in my high school, there were girls that were really very good in math, but then when it came to choose the A levels, they decided not to do that because they weren't sure if they would be that good. And whereas there was these guys who weren't actually very good in math, but they still thought that I'm a man, I need to study math. So I asked my daughter that, and she was like, "What? That's ridiculous. I've never heard anything like that." And it made me so happy. Like maybe this is changing in her generation. It's she thought that it was the most stupidest things she had ever heard. And that's how it should be, right? And then second, maybe something where also societies can help is still to the enablement. So like in Finland, we do have many things pretty well in terms of the overall culture, not just for girls or for mothers, but also fathers, that it's okay to leave work at 4:30 if you need to pick up your kids from daycare, and daycares are also cheap and high quality and so forth. So I think these kind of things that also compared to say Germany, where we still has oftentimes, I don't know, Germans in the audience, but still say need to bring your own lunch and so forth. So even or go early to home to eat. So because it's assumed that mothers are stay-at-home moms. So I think that those are the things that kind of enable it also for girls to advance in their careers.
These subtle things, when I see that my daughter is growing up and my son is growing up, they're both seeing new Marvel or superhero movies and women, or lots of cartoons where girls are actually playing a major role and are the protagonists, or even the Star Wars movies. I can't imagine my son, and he's going to be 7 next month, growing up in a world where he was always seeing just heroes who were men like I did. I'm sure it has some kind of impact, but you're right, it's changing. And the media has a lot of role to play there. And I loved your slide where you were superhero. It was lovely. I think all young women and old women, everybody should just think of themselves as a superhero.
Actually, that's the story behind that. I wanted to be a Zorro always. And actually, I appeared as Zorro at my cousin's birthday party, and I was a boy, like I was Zorro, he's a guy. And people were scared, like, what happened to you, Muren? And that was actually the first time I felt like gender discrimination in my life. I was 11 something. That comes from that.
I want to take the opportunity to take at least one question from the audience, if there is one. Yeah, over here, maybe. If you speak, I can repeat the question.
What advice do you give to the next move into frontier tech, what would that be?
So what is your one piece of advice for the next generation of frontier tech women leaders?
I would say don't try to be always perfect. It's okay to be imperfect, because women tend to be, they want to always be too perfect, and so they work too much, to be that, image they want. Versus men, they have the confidence they are perfect, but actually they are not. So they actually are more relaxed, and even in the performance on the stage, even at their work, at the board meetings. And I would say, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just be yourself and do what you can do. And you don't need to be always perfect everywhere. You just be yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice. And I would also say that don't think of anything in particular like deep tech or something like that. Actually follow problems and creatively solving them, because the deep tech world is also shifting very rapidly because there's so much evolution happening in tech that one should just try to think of different kinds of problems that you want to solve, that you're passionate about, and you will run into the need of technology automatically. So the focus needs to, it's like, wanting to be a doctor or an accountant or something else versus like, I want to solve this particular problem. So the more, and I think women are really good at that, just being problem solvers and then using whatever they need to for that. And inevitably, I would say 90% of anything that happens in the next couple of decades will have some element of tech in it.
Yeah, this is great advice. I would say to women founders, in particular, women who are wanting to get into tech, actually it's our diversity, the viewpoint from our own experience that's missing in the majority of project design, product design, services design now. What we have is an ecosystem of things that are, for the most part, have been designed by men for the rest of us. This is missing a good half of the population, if not a bit more, women actually being in the majority. So as women who are coming into tech, it's a tremendous opportunity to create products and services for the rest of us. Women have an ability to be much more inclusive in our viewpoints coming from the backgrounds that we do, the experiences that we have. And as founders in particular, I think that actually puts us at a significant competitive advantage in the future.
Yeah, I would also say, don't just think of technology as necessarily like kids tend to think of these gadgets and this like very, in a way, narrow way. But think about like the enablers. How we can solve climate change, how we can the medicine. So really the motivation, the important things of life. And then there are many roles in tech companies, like you're saying. So it's not that everybody needs to be the engineer. You can help in many ways. So in a way, and also really. Agree with you that it's a bit this jump. So do what you think makes sense, what you would like to do, what you're interested. Also think of those these kind of new areas and think how you can make an impact in your life onto that of others, and then just go for it. Let it loose a bit, and life will carry you in many ways.
Amazing. We actually have time for one more question, I think, if there is one more. Yes, an excited one. There's a mic, actually.
What we can do to have more women in? All from here, there, we're from Finland, so it's two of us, but then what could we actually do? Like something serious, practical next step.
To have more women entrepreneurs in the world, in general? I think that the issue that you raised of funding is a very big issue, because if you look at, if you think about it, what happened with microfinance? So I worked in villages in microfinance, and I know that women have ideas. But if you're talking about the majority of women in the world, they are in the developing world, and they are all young, and they don't have access, they're underbanked. So if you want to actually deal with the problem head on, you give them loans. You give them capital. And you will see that I've had women, I went in a village once, there's a woman over there, poor woman sitting on the floor. She had like a baby hanging, but the moment she knew she would have some money and wasn't going to go to her drunk husband, she was full of ideas. She knew exactly what she wanted to do. And she then did it. She raised some husbandry, then she started something else, and she didn't make a ton of money, but she made enough. She didn't have to rely on anybody. And so I think that part of the problem is that we're all thinking in the like Western world, developed world, where the real women out there going every way, doing their work are in these developing countries. And it is unjust. They are not behind because they're thinking or they're lacking confidence. They're behind because they don't have access. And I think the moment we start giving it to them, they will surprise us. From Indonesia, from Africa, from Bangladesh, we'll be so proud of them, and they will inspire us.
I have to add, one of the platforms that my company develops is for self-help groups. We're working in India, 14 countries across Africa and the Caribbean. So what we do is create a technology that standardizes women's savings groups for women's collective empowerment, social and economic transformation. It's just as you say. What we find is it is absolutely not about lack of ideas. It is about lack of capital and lack of support. But quite frankly, if we know that 90% plus of businesses fail, it's also about de-risking entrepreneurship. And what we find is that when women come together in savings groups, so the basic function of this is everyone's contributing a small amount, the best business idea gets the loan, and as she pays it back, everyone else is learning from her successes, but also from her failures. So it's a real MBA, if you will, a real experience for people to learn, so that when they're doing their own businesses, they're also networked, they're more likely to succeed. So when women are doing this together, they're much more likely to take that bold step forward, even if entrepreneurship isn't necessarily something that's encouraged in their families. We see very quickly, actually, women have been at markets as long as markets have been around. We are born entrepreneurs. It's a question of connecting us to capital and giving us that capacity to succeed and protecting us when we fail.
That's awesome. Good job.
Yeah, I think this is slightly different now. Like if I think where we're coming from in Northern Europe, at least. As such, much of these enablers are there, and they are the same. So I'm just trying to think what it really is. Maybe one thing that women could do, and this comes maybe also back to the overall promotion, is that startups are kind of hot right now. So it's great to be. Everybody knows that 2 out of 100 actually survives, but it's still like a good vibe. Then even maybe hook up with a group of people, men, women, and so you don't always need to do it by yourself. You find a good team, and then you start doing it, and actually they even say these funny things like that although many entrepreneurs are young, but actually the most successful ones are already like 45. So people who have already a bit of like experience under their belt, and then they can apply them now in their own businesses. So I don't have a very good answer to you. What is exactly this? Is the $1,000 question, but okay, yes, well,
All eyes on you.
I actually really like all of your good questions and answers. I would focus on education again, to tell young girls from the beginning that you can be entrepreneurs too, and opening access to them and having courses for them to teach them how they can become entrepreneurs, and giving them basically the sense of, okay, they have the same opportunity, so why not they do the same.
Maybe we need to raise funds, start investing in women.
There are initiatives, but why not? We should do.
Amazing. So for the final time this weekend, I will say thank you, audience.
Thank you to you.
Thank you, panel.
He's done
And I have to say,
panel.
as a white male, I really related with a lot of what you said. So thank you very much. It was a fun panel.
Awesome.
And,
Thanks, Avery.
Thanks a lot.
Guys.
Thank you.